Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Welcome to Developing Your Agile Workforce, 10 Essential Skills. Today's webinar will be presented by Sonia Gladwin, Director of Sales and Solutions at the Center for Workforce Solutions at Anne Arundel Community College, along with a guest presenter. Sonia will introduce our guest to you shortly. You can follow other attendees and share with your own followers on Twitter. Please use the hashtag Radical Leadership and the handle @AACCBiz to tweet throughout and after the presentation. Please use the question input box on the sidebar of your screen at any time during the webinar. Our presenters will choose a few of your questions throughout the presentation to respond to, and we will do our best to follow up after the webinar to answer any questions that do not get addressed today. We'll also present a few poll questions for you to respond to during the webinar. And now, Sonia Gladwin will introduce you to our guest speaker. Go ahead,
Good
Sonia.
afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We feel very privileged and honored to have our guest speaker, Dr. Laura Bernstein, with us. She's formerly a majority owner of Vision Point Productions, where I originally met her. She's which was a business specializing in creating rich media training resources to help organizations foster diversity and respect and create high-performing work teams. During her tenure there at Vision Points, Laura served as the executive producer and subject matter expert for several award-winning and commercially available training resources. Her contribution to the performance improvement industry has also been seen in her leadership on Instructional Systems Association boards, her many presentations at regional and national conferences, including but not limited to ATD, the Association for Training for Talent Development, the National Council for Continuing Education and Training, and the Society for Human Resource Management. Most recently, Dr. Bernstein briefly served as the EVP of Learning Solutions for our partner, Global Corporate College, which some of you may be familiar with, and currently is working with several organizations to help them meet their talent development needs. Join me in welcoming Laura.
Thank you so much, Sonia. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to talking about developing our Agile workforce. Hopefully everybody can see the presentation on the screen. And we are going to first talk for just a moment about what we're hoping to accomplish today. So the very first thing that we would like to do is provide a framework for everyone to be able to analyze the extent of agility within each of your organizations. And then what we'd like to do is review 10 essential new skills that support an agile workforce. And then we can consider some appropriate development strategies for each of those skills as we move forward. Now, as we talk about an agile workforce, it really includes 5 dimensions of work. And these 5 dimensions of work are listed here. The first one has to do with how we source or resource our work. And sourcing has to do with not only the financial aspects, but also the talent aspects of how we either insource work from a contract basis, or we outsource work, or we employ people within each of our organizations. So really getting our arms around how we source work and what the priorities are for work is really what sourcing is all about. The second dimension of work that supports an agile workforce has to do with the actual tasks, the job functions, the workload, and the specific duties or responsibilities that each individual person on a team or within an organization would have. And although tasks have been around, since the beginning of work, what's important in an agile workforce is that the tasks be defined in such a way that there are specialty tasks, but that more than one person, in fact several people, can make things happen in an organization so that you don't experience delays. If one person is out, a customer should never experience a delay in receiving whatever information, for example, that they may have requested. The third dimension of work has to do with roles and responsibilities. And although, again, roles and responsibilities have been around, since the beginning of job descriptions, in the context of an agile workforce, what we're really talking about is what is everybody's role and responsibility to respond fast and to create a culture that will support an agile workforce. We also have the whole element of time, and in an agile workforce, we're looking at speed being very critical. Sometimes speed will actually take priority over the quality of work. So it doesn't mean that we want to do low-quality work, but it means that speed might actually take precedence. So something might be good enough when it's 95% versus 100%, as long as we can get it done quick enough. And then the last dimension of work, of course, has to do with location, and we're all aware that in today's work world, our environment has both spaces that allow people to work face-to-face, as well as technology-enabled work processes that allow us to either work virtually or also to work face-to-face, but not necessarily sitting in the same room. So these are the 5 dimensions of an agile workforce. Now, something that's really important is that we need to align and operationalize essential components. And these components really have to do with embracing change at all levels of the organization. I'm going to go back for just a moment to those components. I kind of skipped ahead a little bit too quickly there. As you see the 6 components that are listed here, all of these are coming together inside of an organization. And although we're not going to discuss each one of these right now, you can tell by looking at the list that if any one of these things is not in alignment or integrated with another, it will be very difficult to align and then operationalize an agile workforce. So one of the biggest things an organization can do when it is evaluating its own ability to be an agile workforce is to look at these 6 areas and really start thinking about how everything is aligned to values. Are the systems aligned? Are the processes aligned? Are the dreams and the hopes of the top leadership really coming through in how we handle work process and systems and policies and procedures and those types of things? So an agile workforce includes 5 dimensions of work. We need to align and operationalize all of the essential components, and then we also need to embrace change at all levels of the organization. And I think it's really important to focus in on the point that customers and employees are at the center of change. These are the people that drive change. And they are not the subject of change. And when you assess within your own organization where you fall on sort of the continuum of an agile workforce, if you can look at what happens inside of your organization when change is happening, and of course today we have pervasive change, you can see how customers and employees are impacted. And if they are the subject of change or feel that they are the subject of change, then there's a lot of work to be done in terms of creating and sustaining that agile workforce. If, on the other hand, the customers and the employees are really at that center for change and they're driving that change and they've embraced it, you might be further along on that particular continuum. Now we're going to pause here for just a moment and take a poll and see what our group is most interested in today. And when you think about all the things that we're going to talk about, what I'd like is some feedback on whether you're most interested in understanding the concepts and characteristics of an agile workforce, using criteria to evaluate how agile your organization really is, or learning about the new skills to develop workforce agility. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Patty to complete our poll. And Patty. I am having a little technical difficulty on my end seeing the screen at the moment. So I'm hoping that the poll is open, and
It is.
if you could comment, that would be great.
Okay, it looks like for number 1, you have 14%. For number 2, you have 42%. And for number 3, you have 42%.
Excellent. Okay. Are we back to seeing?
Yes, you can run your screen share.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for the technical difficulty. I'm hoping that everybody can see characteristics of an agile workforce. And what I'd like to do is make sure that it sounds like we have a mix of interests. I'll make sure I touch on each of the priorities that came out just a moment ago. So as we move forward with characteristics of an agile workforce, what I'd like us to be able to do is consider the concepts and the characteristics of an agile workforce before we actually start talking about assessing agility and developing skills. So what I'd like to do is invite Sonia to join me in discussing some of these important dynamics. And Sonia, if you'd like to talk about the first one, historical longevity.
Right. Historical longevity, it's important to acknowledge the concept of agility since it's been around for a while. In the 50s, if you remember, agility was a hot topic in the field of air combat. In the early 90s, it became an important concept in manufacturing. Today, when we, the Center for Workforce Solutions at Anne Arundel, speak with our customers about agility, we're really talking about things like being that customers have the ability that they have the agility. We're talking about quickly responding to customer needs and the market changes, taking advantage of opportunities, and preparing our organizations to deal with the unpredictable changes of today. It's really about the company's ability to take advantage of opportunities while countering competitive forces.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's continue to talk about some additional characteristics. The next one has to do with creating a specific type of culture, a culture of creativity, a culture of self-discipline, and a culture of accountability. And oftentimes when I'm working with client organizations and we talk about a culture of accountability, this is where we need to have some deep and broad conversations about how we look at priorities, how we develop people, how we make sure that we're making the main thing, the main priority, really making the main thing the main thing. And developing that culture where people are not afraid to talk about making sure we're getting the results through and making sure that that is actually part of our culture in doing that. We also, in an agile workforce, need to give equal attention to results and process and relationships. And often in a traditional type of an organizational model, we're very, very focused on results and then to a lesser extent the process by which we achieve those results and then the relationships that are developed within the organization. In an agile workforce, really all three of these things are like sitting on a three-legged chair, and they really need to be given equal attention. And when we use the words equal attention, we don't just mean talking about them. We also mean things like our performance reviews, our coaching process, anything that supports how work is getting done. We need to make sure that everything is supportive of these three things being integrated together and, again, being given equal attention. Sonia, would you like to talk about the next one?
Ooh, widespread acceptance of the new normal. Sure. Our new normal is typically change. I'm not sure how many folks deal with change on a daily basis, maybe a few of us. Organizations, especially the top leaders of our organizations, accept pervasive change and ambiguity and volatility all as the new normal. It's constant firefighting and dealing with the unseen.
Excellent. The next one has to do with collaboration and shared ownership. In a traditional model inside an organization, even when you have leaders at every level, there is more of a hierarchy where director-level individuals make a lot of decisions and push those decisions down into the masses within an organization. Whereas in a truly agile workforce, you have a heightened sense of collaboration and a shared ownership for deciding priorities, making decisions, implementing the activities to achieve whatever the goals are. So there's just a very heightened sense of collaboration and shared ownership. And then lastly, there's a sense of freedom inside an agile workforce. There's freedom to try new things. There's freedom to make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and then make new decisions based on whatever those learnings are. And there's a sense of freedom in terms of decision-making and empowerment where all levels of the organization are able to work with customers and not have to work through a set protocol or process in an administrative type of a way, but more in a way where everybody's empowered to contribute to the organization. Sonia, would you like to take the next one?
And, warp speed is really the new norm. I think when you think about an agile workforce and you think about the things that you want them to have as characteristics, you really want those people to be able to work as quickly as possible in the ever-changing environments that we have. When is the last time you were able to tell someone, take your time on that, or get back to me next week or the week after? I think almost everything is expected yesterday, and our expectations as well as our customers' expectations has changed, and with those characteristics, we need to be able to have that agile workforce be able to move as quickly as possible, make quick decisions, and move forward at the speed of what now business is saying is the speed of business, quote unquote.
Excellent, thank you. Another characteristic of an agile workforce has to do with the makeup of a team and how a team functions. And inside an agile workforce, we need to create teams that make sense, not only because individuals might represent a particular function or a particular level within the organization, or because they carry a particular title, but because instead they bring a certain type of strength that the team needs to be able to leverage in order to achieve whatever the goals and priorities and outcomes are for that particular team or that particular project a group of individuals is working on. So teams that make sense, and when an outsider walks into an agile company, they're able to actually see and feel why a certain group of individuals has been put together for a particular reason. And typically in an agile workforce, teams are brought together and then they're disbanded more quickly, or they go into a sunset mode where maybe they will come back if there's a new topic that needs to be addressed. But they come together, they look at whatever the issues and dilemmas might be, and then they disband rather than having ongoing conversations when they're not needed. There's lots of teams that an ongoing team might be necessary, but you see a lot of smaller teams being put together and disbanded in an agile work environment. Now, the last bullet on this particular slide really has to do with context. And several of you may have heard me say before that content is king. And I would say, 10 years ago, content was extremely important. And what we talked about was extremely important. But in today's world, it all has to do with context and making sure that each individual within an organization really understands not only what they're doing, but why they're doing it, the impact that they're having or could have if they achieve whatever the particular goal might be. So context is extremely, extremely important. So let's go ahead and move on to talking about promoting workforce agility. So the first thing that we want to talk about is how we redefine our values. And this may come as a surprise to some of you, because a lot of organizations feel very attached to the values that they have. And many organizations have spent a lot of time and energy and years developing, honing, and really trying to live out those values. But when you try to create an agile work environment, it's really important to take a look at our values and to see which ones are supporting our ability to be an agile workforce, and which ones might be getting in the way, and what new values we might need to add to our list that will help us become even more agile than we are. So it's a really good opportunity to take a look not only at the values that are written down, but the values that appear to be norm within an organization. The next one has to do with strengthening the core. And, this is not new to anybody. This really has to do with taking a look at what your organization is good at and what is its core function, core purpose, and really making sure that that is a very solid core foundation before adding on to that and building on that and creating value-added products and services. So really making sure that the core is as strong as it possibly can be and that everyone really understands the identity of the organization. Sharing power inside of the workforce is extremely important. When we go to promote workforce agility, and promote means to coach and support and create systems and processes and all kinds of things that allow us to create and sustain that agile workforce, sharing power becomes extremely important. And again, this gets back to shared decision making and collaborative type relationships. The next one has to do with creating a bias for action. And there are lots of organizations that want to get things done but have either bureaucratic processes or an infrastructure or very well-intended, good-intended processes and systems that really bog down the ability to get things done quickly. And so taking a look at cycles of work and how quickly it takes us, how quick we can get something done from the beginning of the cycle of work to the end of the cycle of work is extremely important. And everyone in the organization needs to learn how to have that bias for action, wanting to get things done and get them done as quickly as possible. The next one is to view learning as a vital business strategy. And in a moment when we talk about the 10 skills, we'll be talking a little bit more about one skill called immersive learning. And at this point in the work environment today, we no longer can afford as organizations to look at learning and training as a cost line item. And, this is not something that is new to our thinking as, business leaders and HR professionals, but as, just organization-wide, we have to put emphasis and give our employees time to learn, because learning how to learn allows us to respond quicker to dilemmas and allows us to really strengthen the core and allows us to, move forward and achieve whatever the goals are for the organization. We also need to use technology. So it's no longer a question about whether to use or not to use technology. Now it's really a question about how do we further automate and how do we further integrate how we share knowledge. With the new normal and the new makeup of organizations today, with our multi-generational workforce and our global workforce, we are seeing that when employees stay in an organization for 3 to 5 years, that's a long time. And so what we can't do is afford to allow any one individual in our organization to be the knowledge keeper, the keeper of all information on particular projects, particular processes. So it's very, very important for us to create ways to integrate that knowledge sharing, while at the same time remembering that we need to keep an equal focus on the task or the outcome, the process by which we work, and the relationships that we build. So we also cannot rely 100% solely on technology for information sharing and knowledge sharing. We really need to find a way to do that via both systems and technology, and then also through relationships. And then this is also a good time when we are looking at promoting workforce agility to actually systemically and systematically update our organizational structure, to really look at whether or not all of the pieces and parts that we want and need are in place, and whether all those pieces and parts are actually operating together in the most efficient and effective manner. This next one really has to do with how we help our organizations, how we help our leaders and all of our individual contributors foster a widespread acceptance for change and ambiguity. It is not important any longer to try to make things that are ambiguous clear, because we live in a world where ambiguity abounds. And so what's more important than trying to figure out how to make something clear when it truly isn't clear, what's more important is to really help people know how do you deal with ambiguity in the best possible way to accomplish, again, whatever goals and objectives we might have. And then the last bullet is to reward agility. So we want to put a lot of energy and effort into promoting and creating an agile workforce, and then what often happens is we forget to build in the appropriate rewards and incentives to making sure that we can maintain and sustain this workforce agility. So finding ways and looking at the reward system is extremely important.
Laura, not to interrupt, but before you move on from promoting workforce agility, can you share with us some of your perspective on who really is responsible for creating and fostering workforce agility?
Absolutely. In fact, what a great transition. Let's go ahead and do a poll, and then I will share my perspective as well. So I'd like to know from everyone's perspective, whose job really is it to drive that implementation? And I'm going to go ahead and move the control back to Patty so that she can open up the poll.
Just click pause sharing. That ought to do it. The little yellow button there.
And hopefully we can see the poll on the screen. Patty, I am unable to see it, so I'm going to allow you to share the results with everybody as well before it comes back to me.
Still voting. Okay. So it looks like the majority, 45%, say CEO, 33% frontline management, and 16% individual contributors.
Excellent. Interesting. What's interesting is I think you can actually make an argument that it's everybody's job to drive implementation. And what I have found is that each of the roles that you see listed here are responsible for a different part of the implementation. So for example, the CEO or the top leader, the top executive within an organization, they're really responsible for driving the communication, the investment, and the measurement aspects of agility implementation. And if you look at the CFO or the financial officer's role, they're really responsible for sharing and making sure that the organization has the appropriate tools and the correct data, and actually they drive the measurement aspects of the implementation. Your human resources professionals really take on the primary function to drive most aspects of implementation, the hiring of individuals, the onboarding or induction of individuals, partnering with different business units, department management, and really making sure that everybody has what they need to create the culture and to create the processes and systems that we need in an agile work environment. When you look at the frontline manager, they collaborate with human resources, and in some organizations, frontline managers are actually the primary role or the primary function to drive the implementation. And then, as many of you said, individual contributors are responsible for driving the actual execution. So, all of these roles are extremely important, and it takes everybody, it takes the community collaborating together to drive an agile work team. Now, one quick thing that I would like to comment on before we move on is how important the concept of discipline is. So within each of these functions and inside your organizations, you might define what each of these roles or other roles will have as their primary function in creating and sustaining an agile work environment. And in doing that, one of the most important things to do as you're building in what that means for you and your organization is to build in the concept of discipline within that execution. So what gets talked about, gets paid attention to, and gets worked on. And if we talk about agile work environments one time only, and then we don't put forward the energy and the effort into building it into priorities and goals and coaching plans and performance management and all of the systems and all of the work processes, then we're not taking a very disciplined approach. And it's likely to not get done, or the success of it won't be as successful as you'd like to see. Now what we're going to do is sort of pull back the curtain a little bit and analyze the extent of agility within our own organizations. So as you're looking at each example as we go through of these, recognize there is a continuum from left to right. So think about your entire organization's behavior, not just your personal view or your personal vision, but try to think about all the different functions and departments and people within your organization, and think about what that looks like and sounds like and feels like as we're going through each of these dimensions. And then as a follow-up to this webinar, what I would encourage you to do is to take each of these dimensions and sort of pull back that curtain inside your own work team when you're back in the office, and really take a look at everything that goes into these. So to the left is a more traditional type of a work environment, and to the right is an agile work environment. So when we look at organizations, if I were to walk in and just roam the halls, talk to people, make some observations, I'm going to be looking for whether or not there are a lot of plans and a lot of discussion about protocol, or whether there is a lot of discussion and thoughts and ideas around how we respond to change. And there, again, there's this continuum between the two. When we start looking at paperwork and documentation, what we look at is whether or not our organization is talking always about the legal interpretation, which of course is extremely important, or whether we're talking about the spirit of the contract. And again, it's not to say that one is better than the other. An attorney would obviously argue that we need to make sure that the legal interpretation is extremely important, but someone going to execute a contract and building a relationship with, say, a vendor or a customer is going to be looking at the spirit of the contract. So when you look at an agile work environment, you're looking at whether or not the solid legal contract is also being discussed in a spirit of the contract sort of way. The next one has to do with how work is scheduled. Is your organization focused on work hours, or is your organization focused on work outcome? Now, this does not mean that if you want to be an agile work environment that you don't have work hours. Of course you have work hours, but what's measured and what's most important and what's talked about is going to be getting the work done, getting the goals achieved, what that work outcome is, and then work hours are secondary, so that it doesn't matter what the work hours are as long as it is in complete alignment with whatever the work outcome is. The next one has to do with how we make decisions. And in traditional organizations, we have a very strong infrastructure for an approval process, and in a very agile work environment, there is decision power that is dispersed among many employees within the organization. And again, keep in mind there's a continuum from left to right in terms of how agile you either want to be or how agile you are. And again, back in your work environment, you can be thinking about, to what extent you want to be agile, keeping in mind that it's all of these things put together that make you agile. So you need to move to the right-hand side on all aspects to some
Choose the amount you want and purchase your card at the Arnold Campus Cashier's Office in the Student Services Center, Room 120. For more information, call 410-777-2236 or visit www.aacc.edu/giftcards.
Patty, is everyone getting this interference?
I believe so, whoever just paused from Anne Arundel.
Can you mute everyone else's line but the three of us?
Everybody is muted except, let me see who else is not. Melanie?
Yeah, you need to mute her.
Yeah, I don't know her number, so I can't tell which number she's in on.
Think you can't afford a college education? Think again.
You have mine and Laura's.
Financial aid staffers can help you navigate the application process and open the doors to grants, loans, scholarships, and work study opportunities. We work hard to help you connect to the financial assistance you need to attend classes. Check out the college website at www.aacc.edu/aid to get started, or call the
I can't find anybody else that's not muted.
777-2203.
That is.
Are you a cable?
I believe it's Melanie. I can't. Like it stopped, maybe.
Should I go ahead and continue, Patty?
I would say go ahead.
Okay. Again, we apologize for that inconvenience. As we continue to pull back the curtain and we look at reference points for how we talk about work, how we talk about customers, how we talk about documentation, work schedules, systems, everything, priorities, anything in an organization that you might be talking about at any point throughout your work day. In a traditional environment, there are certain kinds of reference points and vocabulary that you've historically used for years, whereas in an agile work environment, you start hearing new words, you start hearing new vocabulary. And so looking at what kind of vocabulary you're using is extremely important. Additionally, in a traditional work environment, you have a controlled environment in a traditional organization, where you have a team-driven environment in an agile work team. And what's interesting is this sort of gets back to the self-directed work teams of the late 70s and 80s. And a little bit different from that, though, is that teams in an agile work environment come and go as certain types of projects, you need to ebb and flow within the work of an organization. Traditional behavior versus agile behavior, the bias for action that you'll see in an agile work environment, the types of conversations that you have about creativity and innovation and trying new things and not letting delays get in your way. So there's traditional ways of dealing with those things, and you can look back in your own organization to see what you traditionally have done and what you expect people to do differently, and then that will guide and lead you in terms of what we need to expect and therefore train, coach, and measure to. The primary focus or primary measurement in a traditional organization is on the what. It's on the outcome. In an agile work environment, it's what have we learned, how are we going about our work, it's on the how, the process of getting the work done, and again, that balance between process and work and relationships. All of those are equally important versus just focusing on the outcome. In a traditional work environment, for those organizations that have been thinking about and planning and actually attempting to execute to create an agile workforce over the last couple of years, when you're more on the traditional side, agility is something that you begin to incorporate into your protocol. You start looking at ways to become more agile. And if you're on that end of the spectrum, you're still more toward a traditional organization attempting to be agile. Whereas if you use agility to drive your protocol, if you take agility and you say, we want to be an agile workforce, therefore what does this mean for each system, each process, each priority and each goal, then you're more on the side of the agile workforce. So again, it's the difference between incorporating it into something that you're doing already, historically, or allowing agility to drive your protocol. So this is a good time to check in, and what I'd like to do is turn the control back over to Patty to, see if we could bring up that poll. And again, Patty, for some reason the technology is not functioning on my end. So if you can bring that up and then share the results, that would be great.
Okay, still voting. It looks like the majority is in the second group with a few, still coming. Yeah, the majority is in the second group and a few in the third group.
Excellent. Okay, so the good news is that many people are reporting that they're pleased to report that to an extent they are agile. However, there are some people that really are not agile and hopefully would like to become agile, and that's to be expected. So there are some skills that can help us create and develop our agile workforce. And what I'd like to do is introduce each of these skills. If anyone has an example and they'd like to use the chat feature to provide an example of how their organization is using the skill, please go ahead and do that, and then at some appropriate point, Patty or Sonia will interject with an example as well. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with kind of reviewing each of these skills. So the first thing that we need to recognize is that, we all know that the leadership landscape has changed. So it's more complex, it's more volatile, it's more unpredictable. And these skills that we're going to be talking about are really needed for leadership because leadership itself has also changed. So what we expect leaders to do may not have changed, but the environment in which they need to make decisions is much different. So we need more complex, more adaptive thinking abilities, the ability to thrive in situations of rapid change and uncertainty. So the first skill is what we call maker instinct. And what that really is this inner drive to build and to grow things and to connect with other people while we are making. And what's interesting about this instinct is that it really exists everywhere. So we use words like making time, making money, making work, making certain, making history. So you can put any word you'd like. We as human beings really have this basic maker instinct, and it precedes all other skills that will be needed for future leadership. And by definition, really, leaders are makers. And with the maker instinct, we have this constant desire to improve the organization around us. So the skill behind this, so the skill behind the instinct, is the ability to exploit that and to use that and to amplify that through connectivity. Now the next one has to do with clarity. And, clarity is a word that, we have used a lot, and it doesn't seem like it would be a new skill. But really, it refers to our ability to cope, our ability to make sense of the messes and the contradictions, and to find a direction or to make a decision in the middle of a contradiction, and the ability to see what the future can look like way before other people can see it. So we as leaders and we as individual contributors need to be able to have that deep understanding of ourselves, recognize our ability to make a statement about that future, to be very flexible. And an interesting point about clarity is that what I have found is that individuals in an organization or leaders, leaders and individuals, everybody, who have not had to deal with difficult times, they're actually at a disadvantage in an agile work environment, because learning to work and learning to lead in difficult times is actually helpful to becoming more clear. It actually helps you to develop this particular skill. So again, leadership clarity or individual clarity is not really a new concept, but the environment in which we now work really demands a heightened sense of this clarity in order to sort of temper that uncertainty to make the future.
And Laura, we've talked about pace a lot today. In such a fast-paced world, connecting the dots, even just getting through email clutter on a day-to-day basis is one of my biggest challenges. Could you give us your perspective and maybe how some of our top radical leaders are making time for clarity, leveraging that clear vision that you discussed to give their organizations, some type of strategic advantage?
Yes, I can. So it's actually really a simple answer. I mentioned it just very briefly. Clarity really requires understanding yourself, recognizing your own purpose, the ability to make thoughts and statements about the future with an enthusiasm that attracts other people, to be able to sort of cut through that clutter. So when I talk with top leaders in an organization and I think about and I hear them in terms of how they make time for clarity, what I hear is that these are people who are well-read. They take time to really understand what's going on in the world so they can anticipate, external forces that might be coming into play within their organization. These are people who genuinely care about how work is getting done, so they walk around or they pick up the phone and they talk to people within the organization. So it's really people who are paying attention. That's really the simple answer, is that they don't overcomplicate things by overanalyzing. They just pay attention to what the reality is of a situation, and they accept whatever that reality is, and that really helps them become clearer. So, rather than thinking about what they want the reality to be, they think about what the reality really is, whether they like that reality or not.
Fantastic. And for clarity purposes, Laura, and into your next transition to dilemma flipping, our dilemma is that we have 10 minutes left with our audience, and so we just want to make sure that we leave time for each of these key skills.
Excellent. Thank you. We will move through them quickly. So as we turn to the next skill, which is dilemma flipping, I'm reminded of something that F. Scott Fitzgerald had said, and this is, back in the early 1930s, or maybe the mid-1930s. And he said, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. And I think what's really interesting about that statement is that's really what dilemma flipping is all about. We in the 21st century, as we are working in our organizations, we rarely get the satisfaction of solving a problem. And rather what we are faced with are multiple dilemmas, which, unlike problems, cannot be solved. So really a dilemma is something that cannot be solved. And we need to make sure that we can still put together viable strategies when faced with a challenge that cannot be solved in traditional ways. So just a couple of things to share with you in terms of practicing the skill of dilemma flipping, something that each and every one of us can do very easily. One thing would be to stand in a different place, sit at a different spot in the meeting, change your point of view, turn a problem upside down. Another thing is to ask very powerful questions. Immerse yourself in possible scenarios and what ifs. What if we thought about it this way? What if we thought about it a different way? And maybe even change the pace of your attention on a particular problem, and change the speed at which you might approach a particular dilemma. So let's move on to immersive learning. And Sonia, did you want to comment on this one, or did you want me to move us forward?
Let's just go ahead and move forward. I'm just concerned that we won't get to all of the pieces, if you don't mind.
Okay, excellent. So when we look at immersive learning, what we're really doing is we're looking at close-up engagement in a wide range of first-person learning environments. So this could include simulations of reality, even things like alternate reality games, three-dimensional online settings, role plays, mentoring, so not everything is technology enabled, reverse mentoring, theatrical improvisation, case studies, anything that allows someone to be fully immersed in a first-person way is what this skill is really all about, in giving an individual within an organization the ability to obtain practical experience performing under pressure, but in a safe environment, will allow us to have those coping mechanisms that we need, and again, viewing learning as a business strategy. Now, bioempathy is actually one of my personal favorite skills, because really it's the ability to see things from nature's point of view. And we do that so that we can learn from the natural cycles that surround us. So bioempathy really requires us, all individuals in an organization, as we go to create our agile work environment, we have to be able to see the big picture. It's not good enough for only top leaders to see the big picture. Everyone needs to see the big picture. And we need to see the multiple interrelated parts, the linear, the nonlinear relationships, and all of the cycles of change. And bioempathy really demands that every single person in an agile work environment be able to listen, observe, and appreciate sort of the natural tendencies that we as humans have and how we interact with our systems around us. Now, constructive depolarizing really is the ability to calm tense situations where communication is broken down. And what I'd like to emphasize is that while clarity is critical, as we were talking about earlier, certainty is very, very dangerous. And the more uncertainty a person experiences, the greater the need for that person to feel even more certain, which then makes constructive depolarizing all the more important, because there's this tension between clarity and certainty, and it's a dilemma for most people. And so we as individuals need to be able to redirect this conflict toward constructive engagement and dialogue. And it's really everybody's responsibility within an organization. Quiet transparency is the ability to be open and authentic about what matters most. And to do this in a way that is not over-promoting. And improvisation is a great way to practice quiet transparency. What we learn from improvisation for all individuals in an environment is to take the lead, share the lead, and follow the lead. And quiet transparency really implies a very high level of openness, and it's based on a premise of trust. So anything we can do to develop relationships and trust is something that will help us with this particular skill. The next one is rapid prototyping, and this is really our ability to quickly create early versions of new products, new processes, new systems, and to allow ourselves to fail and to learn from those failures. In fact, the motto of rapid prototyping is fail early, fail often, fail cheaply, and then you'll make a better future. The next two skills I'd like to talk about together. So smart mob organizing is really our ability to create and engage with networks. And commons creating is really about shared assets and creating things that benefit multiple people or organizations. And the best example that I could share is actually Wikipedia. It's one of my favorite examples because it started off as someone's idea to build a complete encyclopedia online, but it took people around the world and individual contributors like you and me to feed the system. And it started as a smart mob. And mob meaning behavior of the group sort of emerges and could be unpredictable, and smart referring to sort of the deliberate use of resources and processes and media to organize that collaborative group work. And then eventually it became this shared asset, so commons creating. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip a scenario that I was going to share with everybody, but I would be happy to entertain questions after the webinar through Anna Rundle, and we can talk about what types of skills would be most beneficial for certain types of situations. And I am happy to make myself available should anybody want to talk through scenarios and talk about which skills would make the most sense. As we do move to close, I do apologize for us running a little bit late today. I would like to do our final poll and then turn it back over to Patty for some final remarks. So let's do our final poll, and then again, thank you everyone for your participation. Patty?
Sure. If you want to end your screen sharing, I think I'll start the poll for you. Okay, still voting.
And as some of you noted in the comments section, I think we all have gained a few tidbits, a few thoughts to maybe take forward in our organization. I know Carol said that she sees a book review assignment in her leadership team's future. And Alan also commented that he's considering these skills and abilities will definitely help energize change in his respective organization. I let Alan know, just so if you're not looking at the comments, that it's extremely premature for me to have this conversation. But I'll go ahead and throw my foot in my mouth at this point. But AACC is in the early development stages of an online product to assist individuals and companies with exploring and practicing these skills. So you will see more to come. If you have specific questions about that, I can give you a little bit more insight, and you can feel free to contact myself or any member of our team to get more information on that. And Patty, about the poll?
Yeah, so the poll, the majority were in the second group, and then which was 71%, and 29% in the first group. So it looks like Sonia is correct. Everybody got something from this.
Well, again, thank you all so much for joining us today. If you didn't get a question answered, or you're like me and maybe need to sleep on it, and tomorrow you might have a few insights or questions, please feel free to get a hold of our team. The general easiest way is email is cws@aacc.edu, and any of us, including Laura, would be happy to answer your questions. Again, thank you so much, and we look forward to reconnecting with you soon.
Great. And if everyone will just take a moment to fill out the short exit survey, it'll present itself when you leave the webinar. Thank you. Have a great day.